everyone, and welcome to something I've wanted to do for a little while now, just sitting down and casually reviewing games that I've been playing. These don't necessarily have to be new games, just games that I think are worth talking about, games that I want to talk about, games that I've been playing and want to share, games that I want to recommend. There really is no time limit on these. I have a whole list of games that I have been writing outlines for. Some date back to 2013, some are from last year. It really doesn't matter to me. I just want to talk about some of these games. I actually did something similar for The Last of Us Part 2 back in 2020, but I don't want these to be as in-depth or as spoilery specifically. Not that these aren't going to be in-depth, but I want these to be, like I said, casual reviews. Just here are my thoughts. Here's maybe 5 to 10 minutes. But yeah, I've wanted to do this for a while. I've kind of finally worked up the energy. I've been working through my insane backlog. I've actually mentally told myself I'm not going to buy any new games until I finish my backlog, and my backlog is huge. And I didn't want those to feel like I was completely wasting all my time, so I thought, hey, why not make something out of that? Why not share my thoughts in a video or a blog post? Chose a video, obviously, as you can see. So in order to justify all the time I've been wasting, welcome to Casual Reviews. And I'm starting off with my very first Dragon Quest game. I actually have a very limited exposure to Dragon Quest. I've always heard the name Dragon Quest thrown around. I've even played Dragon Quest Tactics on my phone. I know about Hero and Smash Bros. I know how insane this franchise is in its home of Japan, but I had never actually just sat down, spent the money, and play through one of these suckers. And truthfully, they've always been really intimidating to me. You know, you hear anything about Dragon Quest and you hear about how insanely long they are, even some of the older games. But I finally did it. I finally took the plunge and I spent money and bought Dragon Quest XI Echoes of an Elusive Age Definitive Edition, which is a mouthful for sure. This is, as the title of the game implies, a definitive edition of Dragon Quest XI, which came out on PS4 and PC first, and then 11S came out on Switch, and then was later ported to PS4 and Xbox One and PC. It's on everything now. Honestly, booting it up, I was really excited because it finally felt like it gave me the same feelings I got when I finally started playing games like Final Fantasy, or how I imagine someone feels when they jump into Grand Theft Auto or something. You have these legendary, almost mythical franchises that have such a big impact on the industry. So it really feels like you're taking part in something when you boot it up, which I definitely felt that. And so it feels really cool to not only say I've played one, but also that I have beaten a Dragon Quest game, which is not something I thought I would say for a very long time. And as a newcomer to the series, I'm not exactly able to tell you what separates 11 from the rest of the franchise, nor am I able to tell you what separates S from the normal Dragon Quest XI experience. But from what I've read and what I can kind of gauge from my own experience, it definitely feels like some of the additions they've made are pretty substantial and convenient. Specifically, I think the biggest thing that most people would talk about is the addition of an orchestral arrangement of the soundtrack, which was originally done using MIDI synthesizers, which I know a lot of people were very disappointed by when the game first came out. It's like, come on, it's Dragon Quest on a home console. Dragon Quest VIII, I believe, had an orchestral soundtrack, and that was on PS2, so why can't we do that? And so them adding an orchestral arrangement was definitely them righting a very big wrong. And also, as a newcomer, my only real assumption going in was that this was a very traditional turn-based fantasy JRPG. You know, this is the game that really started, this is the series that really started JRPGs as a concept, the idea of taking turns and it being set in a very Tolkien-esque fantasy world. And for the most part, that's exactly what Dragon Quest XI-S is. But I really like how it attempts to shake up the traditional formula while not straying too far from being, you know, traditional. It is traditional, but JRPGs are clearly a very tried and true and timeless formula. And the setting itself is very traditional as well. And I know I always say this, but normally I'm not really drawn to traditional fantasy worlds. I like Lord of the Rings, I like The Witcher, I like The Elder Scrolls. You know, there's plenty of fantasy worlds out there that I love, but I kind of tend to just stick to the ones I like, which would be like Lord of the Rings and Elder Scrolls. But Dragon Quest XI really grabbed me with just how much personality is baked into almost every single inch of this world. It's hard not to fall in love at least a little bit with this world and its characters. And I think the thing that really blew me away was how dedicated this game is to evoking the feeling of positivity in the player. There are some really big twists and turns in this game, specifically at the beginning and towards the midpoint, but there's really no doubt that this is a story that will have you ultimately saving the world, saving the day, doing the good thing, being the hero, all that. But with that said, the entire purpose of this game is just to make you feel good as a player, as a human being. It's just a very positive experience. And it really nails the positivity aspect from both a narrative and a gameplay point of view. Through gameplay by constantly empowering the player, and through the narrative by throwing occasional curveballs your way, but ultimately making your successes that much more sweet because you faced obstacles on your way to those successes. And while there is the occasional frustration here and there, you know, difficulty spike or old school kind of inconvenience or whatever, it's legitimately hard to not smile while playing this game. And I think a lot of that has to do with one of its biggest strengths, its incredible cast of characters. The entire cast of this game is great, including some choice NPCs, which is actually kind of rare for JRPGs in my experience. But obviously, the major standouts are your party members. And to me, the standout among those standouts is Sylvando. I really loved this character. In my opinion, Sylvando is kind of the physical manifestation of the emotion that this game is trying to portray, positivity. Sylvando's entire purpose as a character, he has an entire arc where his entire goal is to make people smile. And I feel like that's the goal of the game too. So the goal of the game and the goal of Sylvando are the same, and I think that just makes Sylvando a great character. Like I said, he's kind of the physical manifestation of what this game represents. Which is kind of a shame because he's not really given a lot of overarching prowess. I feel like Serena and Veronica are definitely kind of the major plot, like the overarching plot characters, but Sylvando to me is the best character in this game, bar none. And in times like these where, you know, things are, you don't need me to bring up how things are kind of messed up in the world right now. So Sylvando's goal of just seeing this kind of world in turmoil and saying, I'm gonna try to make the world a better place the only way I know how, which is to make people smile. That, I'm gonna choke up. That legitimately touched me on a really profound and special level. Like legitimately one of the purest souls in all of gaming. I can't get over how special Sylvando is as a character. I think he is clearly the best and strongest character in this entire game. Both just from like I said, his goals are admirable, but I think he has a really touching past as well with his relationship with his father that I don't want to give away because I don't want to touch on spoilers, but I think he has a great personal background as well. I just think he's the most interesting and admirable character out of this entire experience. And the other characters are great too. You have Eric, who's a true bro, Veronica and Serena are great, Rab and Jade, the spoiler one. Obviously, some of the characters are a bit stronger than others, but all in all, I think the entire cast is really awesome. And it's worth noting that I played this game in English. I played using the English voice acting, and I thought, pound for pound, it was all great. There were no real dark spots, nothing that made me cringe or go, I don't know about that one. Yeah, the voice direction and performances were all on point. And I think a lot of that is due to the great localization in this game as well. I think they really nailed the cadence and personality that Square Enix was going for with this game. They really nailed the unique and distinct personality of Dragon Quest through the English localization, through flavor text and dialogue. All of it was very clever and creative and charming. And I mentioned this earlier, but I also want to make it clear that I think the world itself is really cool in this game. It lacks some finer details in specific environments, but all in all, the very vibrant colors and timeless Toriyama art style give it a very rich personality and almost painting-esque landscapes. Erdrea was a world I actively wanted to explore, even if my curiosity wasn't always rewarded all the time. There isn't really always incentive to go out and look through the smaller details of the world, but I didn't care because I liked this world and I thought it was so vibrant and colorful. I wanted to explore every inch on my own, which is not something I typically do ever. And I also love how each of the world's areas are clearly inspired by the real world. You have a France area, you have the Netherlands, you have the Middle East, Spain, Hawaii, Japan, China, Italy, Greece, Scandinavia. It's a very fun cultural experience where the charm of these real world places kind of translates to the charm of their in-game interpretations. And I also love how when you start the game, you're in that kind of typical JRPG starter town, but they keep you there for a while. So when you finally go to the big hub city in the center of the world for the first time, there's legitimate just like, holy crap, this is huge, this is insane, look at all these details, look at all these buildings, look at all these people. You legitimately have the same feeling that the protagonist would in that situation, which is like, holy crap, I've never seen anything like this in my life. Even after just a few hours, and even if you've just played a game like Assassin's Creed or whatever, this big city still feels like something you've never seen before in your entire life. I love the feelings this game evokes. They do such a good job of putting you in the shoes of the hero and making you feel the same things they would. And a lot of these moments are enhanced by the game's amazing orchestral soundtrack. It really gives you the feeling that you're on some kind of epic adventure, because, you know, you are, but the orchestral soundtrack really amplifies that effect. To the point where, like, I can't even imagine what this game would be like without the orchestra. And I almost feel bad for people who played this game using the MIDI version of this soundtrack. I can't imagine it any other way, to be honest. It just feels like it's like part of the game. Each track just breathes so much life and personality into every moment, even when the tracks repeat. Like, you'll probably hear a lot of the music tracks multiple times by the end, but the music still hits every time it matters. Because there are games like Yakuza where you immediately hear a track and you go like, oh, I've heard that one a million times. It's almost goofy at this point when I hear it. It kind of loses all its effect. But with this game, you hear a repeated track and you're just like, oh man, it's this song in this moment. That's so interesting. That's so cool. I'm so much more invested because I recognize this song and I feel the emotions all over again. It's so good. I honestly think that like 10 or even 20 years after the fact, people are still going to be coming back to this soundtrack and reliving these memories, and it's such a beautiful soundtrack when it matters. Like, I just finished the game not too long ago, and I'm already nostalgic every time I hear the music of this game. And speaking of something I never really got tired of, surprisingly, I never got tired of the turn-based combat. I think Persona 5 has really spoiled people with its presentation of turn-based combat, with how just lightning fast and snappy Persona 5 is. I was legitimately afraid of other JRPGs. If they didn't replicate that, then they would feel slow or uninteresting or boring in comparison. And while Dragon Quest XI definitely isn't as snappy as Persona 5, I was never any less engaged. And I don't know if this is sacrilege, but I actually, for the most part, left my party members on CPU. I just let the AI do the work. Unless it was for some very specific fights. But unlike games like Persona 3, where the AI can kind of just do random or stupid stuff every now and then, I felt like the CPU in Dragon Quest XI legitimately, like, they fed off of your moves really well. I felt like they were in service of you instead of you kind of being at the whims of fate, you know? I felt like their purpose was to supplement your moves really well. And while they weren't geniuses all the time, I never really felt disappointed or that I was at a disadvantage leaving them to their own devices. And honestly, one of the things that kept me interested in doing these turn-based battles was the enemy design. The enemy design is so great. I was going into battles just because, like, I just want to see what this enemy looks like in battle. You'll be on the overworld and you're like, what the hell is that? I gotta go fight that. And so honestly, that was one of the things that kept me going, and why some of the grinds didn't really feel like grinds, because every time I saw a new enemy, it's just like, holy crap, that's such a cool or cute or quirky enemy. And like, it's not perfect. I think the free movement system where you can kind of move the characters around during the battle, it's ultimately kind of pointless, but it does give you some agency during the battle, so you're not just hitting X all the time, you can kind of move around and look at things from a new perspective. And I actually kind of like it when you're fighting something really big, you have that kind of grounded camera angle to kind of really soak in the scale of some of these monsters, like if you're fighting a big dragon or something. In that way it works, but ultimately it was kind of a pointless mechanic. There was no like positioning bonuses or anything like that, the same way you have in like Yakuza 7. And even in Yakuza 7 you can't even move freely, I don't think. And for the most part, Dragon Quest XI is pretty easy, but never uninteresting in its combat. But there are some difficulty spikes, specifically in Act 3, that were a little intense for me. Act 3 really forces you to play in a more advanced and cognitive way, more so than you have before, and that can be a bit of a learning curve, which is pretty insane that like you could be 60-70 hours into a game and hit a learning curve, but it can be a bit frustrating. You can get into a groove with the game and then it kind of slaps you and go, no, you gotta play like this now. And it's like, oh, well, should I have been playing like this the whole time? And honestly, I didn't have to grind very much until the final act to kind of beef up for some of the fights, which was kind of disappointing to me, because I never really had to at any point earlier in the game. Another thing I love though was the story in this game. You go into it thinking it's going to be this very predictable, traditional fantasy story, and pretty much right from the jump it's very clear like, no, this is not going to go the way you think it's going to go. And I loved that. And even like super late in the game, it's still throwing some major story curveballs your way. It's a very bold story in my opinion, despite being very traditional in other ways. And while yes, at the end of the day, you could probably guess where the story's gonna go. I mean, it's Dragon Quest, they're not gonna end on a bummer, but it doesn't make anything less impactful. Oh, and one thing I really appreciate about the story in this game is that there are like super weapons, like there's the Sword of Light, in every JRPG, there's some like special weapon that you have to get. And in this game, it's actually like a super weapon. It's actually the best sword in the game, which you don't typically see in JRPGs sometimes. Sometimes you'll get like the alleged, like the story weapon, and it's like, oh, well, the weapon I got from this side quest is better, or this weapon that I crafted myself is way better. I guess this super powerful Sword of Destiny is going in the bag. That's not the case here. I actually found that the main story weapon that the Luminary uses was actually the best weapon in the game, which is a narrative and gameplay choice I really appreciate. You have that narrative and gameplay consistency in this game. And I also appreciated the very simple progression of this game. I think a lot of games, specifically like Western games, are really getting a bit too crazy with their progression systems. I've been playing Assassin's Creed Valhalla, and how when you dedicate skill points, it's like very incremental stat increases, like 2% bow damage, and like, which I had that problem with The Witcher 3 as well. Here it's just very simple. It's a very simple combination of old school and new school ideas. You grind it out, or you whatever, and you level up and you get all these stat bonuses. You don't have to worry about it. It's all taken care of per level. But you also get skill points that you can dedicate to bigger and more substantial abilities like you would in some Western RPGs like Skyrim. And so I really appreciated that fusion of old school and new school design philosophies, and even taking some cues from Western RPGs. The good Western RPGs, I should say. And as you may have heard, this game is an absolute Goliath. It took me around 80 hours to get to the true ending, which I know some people might hear that and go like, wait, only 80 hours? You have to keep in mind, I didn't do everything. I didn't grind it out to level 99 with every character. I did most of the side quests. I actually did all of Tickington except for the secret boss. But yeah, I beat the whole thing in about 80 hours. But one thing I did notice is that the internal clock continues going even when you're in menus. And so what I did was, to get a more accurate time, I deliberately closed the game every time I wasn't playing, even if I was just walking away to use the bathroom, because that time adds up. And then I would just boot it up when I was playing again. That way I could get a more accurate playtime counter. And so I think the reason a lot of people's playtime counters goes to 100, 200 hours is because maybe they didn't realize that it includes in-menu time. But damn, like going for 100% or the platinum is just, that's a Herculean task. All the materials and the cosmetics, like without a guide, this would be torture to me. And some of the tasks can get really tedious in the endgame, specifically the ones surrounding the fun-sized forge. I really liked the fun-sized forge. I think it was a really fun minigame that actually gave you incentive to do it because that's how you get some of the best gear in the game. But trying to hunt down and farm specific materials is just no thanks. And some of the side quests are also a bit grindy, specifically the pet power and rare enemy type quests are a bit grindy, but once you get the ability to trigger the pet powers manually, or you get the items, it's not so bad. Also, Ticking Tin kind of overstays its welcome. It's a bit long, you know, it's a bit slow too. It's a bit more, because the whole appeal of it is that it's replicating the Super Nintendo era of Dragon Quest, but as such it can take a bit longer than you'd like to complete each quest. But it's worth doing because it can help you with grinding without it necessarily feeling like grinding. One last small gripe though I have before I get into the end was the photo mode. I appreciate that this game has a photo mode. I think this game is beautiful and obviously deserves to have photos taken in its world, but it's not exactly an intuitive or modern photo mode. It's good for capturing moments or areas with your party. It's for like more traditional like group photos. It's not so great for creating like artistic imagery the same way you would in games like Gran Turismo Sport or Horizon Zero Dawn. It's purely there just, I think, just to capture specific moments the same way you would if you were just a person with a camera traveling the world with this party. But that being said, this world is stunning. It's worth taking pictures of. You can create some really stunning landscapes with it. But yeah, with all that said, I think Dragon Quest XI-S made me a fan of Dragon Quest. I'm actually kind of eager to hunt down the older games or even a 3DS and play some of the older games the way they were intended to be played after this. I am now a full believer in Dragon Quest. And it also weirdly made me excited to play Smash Bros. Ultimate again. I feel like I could truly appreciate Hero as a character now. And I promised myself that I would not give review scores, that people would just take the review on the merit, understand that review scores are arbitrary, but at the same time, I do enjoy a good review score. So I think it's time. I would give Dragon Quest XI-S Echoes of an Elusive Age a very strong 9 out of 10. It's not perfect, but I think if you're curious, if you like RPGs and you haven't played it, this should be at near the top of your queue. I think this game is a great example of what people would consider to be a modern classic. I don't think it's the quintessential JRPG. I think Persona 5 Royal is still probably the best JRPG I've ever played. I think if you're looking at like what is the best modern JRPG, I think Persona 5 Royal takes the cake, but Dragon Quest XI really caught me off guard with how much I loved this game. Legitimately fighting for a spot in my top 100, maybe even top 50 games of all time after playing this. I really loved this game, so I definitely recommend playing it. So that was a bit longer than I intended. I know I said about 5 to 10 minutes up front. I don't know how long this final thing is, but the recording was very long. It includes flubs, but you know. But yeah, that's all my thoughts on Dragon Quest XI-S Echoes of an Elusive Age Definitive Edition. I have to say the full title every time or else you won't know what game I'm talking about. But yeah, thanks for watching. Stay tuned to the channel. Hit subscribe, hit like, hit share, hit me in the face. I know this isn't one of my traditional videos, which is what I say every time I do a non-traditional video, but I'm actually a bit busy. I'm kind of on the hunt for a new place to live right now, so I'm not really able to just buckle down and make a traditional video the same way I typically do. So please bear with me. These casual reviews are probably what I'm going to be doing for a while now. But yeah, until the next video, thanks for watching and I'll see you next time.